Hey guys, Mike here, the Detroit Borg, with a look at the second generation Moto X for 2014, which is now quite a bit bigger from last year. So we go from 4.7-inch 720p display to a 5.2-inch 1080p display. So a much higher resolution display, which is good for 424 pixels per inch as opposed to 312 from last year. This is still an AMOLED display, so we get those bright, vivid colors and deep black contrast. We also go from a 10 megapixel rear-facing camera to a 13 megapixel rear-facing camera, which now incorporates 4K video recording. We also have a new 2 megapixel front-facing camera, which is good for 1080p, and we're running the latest version of Android, 4.4.4, and of course it's upgradable to Android L. Now this is powered by a Snapdragon 801 clocked at 2.5 gigahertz with an Adreno 330 graphics processor, and we have 2 gigs of RAM and 16 or 32 gigs of internal storage. There is no micro SD expansion slot. Now the new Moto X also features a more premium design with a metal frame, which is now part of the antenna system. We also have a front-facing loudspeaker this time. Now unlike the Moto G, these are not stereo. We have an earpiece and then we have a loudspeaker at the bottom. Now there are a few versions of the Moto X. You can get the Pure Edition, which is basically a GSM unlocked version with a T-Mobile SIM that works on any GSM carrier. That means it comes with no carrier bloatware, no branding or anything like that, and is usually the quickest to get the latest version of Android, and Motorola is pretty good about that. There's also an AT&T and Verizon version, which of course has carrier bloatware and some carrier branding. Now there are 3 base models you can pick up in the store: a black one with a resin back panel, a black with black leather as the one I have here, and white with a bamboo back panel. Now in terms of the back panels, there are 25 different ones, 17 colors, 4 woods and 4 leathers. There's also 10 different accent colors to pick from, which change the camera ring and the buttons along the side, as well as the speaker grills on the front. Now, although Motorola has announced that they're closing their Texas plant, currently if you buy a custom configured Moto X, it does ship from their Texas facility, so they are assembling there. But if you get a standard configuration like the one I have here, the one you can pick up from the store, that one is assembled in China. Alright, so let's go ahead and crack into my AT&T Moto X. Just going to slide off the sleeve here. We get a nice little clamshell box to open up. And inside, first thing you see is the back panel of your Moto X. So as you can see here, I have the black and black leather version, and the first thing you notice when you open up this version is just the strong smell of fresh leather. It smells really nice. This is the same Horween leather also used on the Moto 360. In fact, I joke that when I open up this box, it smells like a Moto 360. Anyway, so let's go ahead and pull this out here. There we go, covered in some plastic. Let me go ahead and peel off this plastic here. There we go. Alright, so let's set this aside for just a moment so we can clear the contents here. Alright, so let's get to the paperwork in this little envelope, Moto X. Just pop this out. Inside, first thing we'll see is a quick start guide, which we'll cover in this video. We also have our safety and warranty information, and if you get the leather version, you'll see this Horween leather handcrafted in the United States. Now on the inside, we'll also find a Motorola branded travel charger with 2 USB ports on the back. We'll find a micro USB charging cable as well, and then we'll find our SIM ejection tool, which is that standard Motorola SIM ejection tool we're familiar with by now, as you can see right here. Alright, so let's go ahead and boot up our Moto X, and then we'll take a close look at the hardware. So as you can see here, we have that very nice Horween leather back panel, which looks a little kind of distressed. It's not a clean, smooth leather. It has a few imperfections in it. I'm not sure if that's the intended look, but mine did have a scratch and has some imperfections here and there, so it definitely looks genuine, but I kind of would like to see it maybe a little neater look in terms of the leather finish here. Now, we can see that we have this big Motorola dimple toward the center, which is now a separate component instead of being molded into the plastic back panel as it was last time. So you can see we have a stainless steel badge in the center, surrounded by one of the accent colors here, so this color is configurable. Now right above that is the 13 megapixel 4K video recording camera module, which does not feature optical image stabilization, just digital stabilization, unless you're recording in 4K, and then that's not available. But you can see around it we have this little light diffuser, which is part of the camera flash system. So you have LEDs on either side of the camera, and this little diffuser is supposed to kind of diffuse the light to give you a more even fill flash. Now toward the bottom you'll find one of the 4 microphones built in here, as well as your AT&T branding. Of course, if you get the Pure Edition, you would not have this. Now toward the top, you'll find a microphone integrated into the edge of the panel. Now toward the top of the phone, you'll find that typical Motorola curve, as well as the top-mounted headphone jack, and a nano SIM tray built into the metal frame of the phone. Now because the metal frame is part of the antenna system, of course we have these antenna insulators up here and around the corner on the left and right hand side. Now toward the bottom you'll see a less dramatic curve than up top. You'll find your micro USB charging port along with more antenna insulators at both corners. Now along the right hand side you'll find your power button, which has a little texture on it, and then you have your smooth volume rocker right below it. Now if you look really closely up here, you can see there's actually quite a bit going on here. We have a 2 megapixel front facing 1080p HD camera. We have our earpiece, which is one of the accent colors here. As you can see, here has this nice kind of texture to it. And then you have your sensors in the upper left corner here, and then you have these infrared sensors, which are part of the mechanism which allows you to wave your hand over the phone to wake it up. Also in the lower bezel in the left hand and right hand corner, you'll find those IR LED blasters again, which are there to read for the presence of your hand when you wave in front of the display, which I'll demonstrate exactly how that works. And then we have our loudspeaker, which also integrates one of the accent colors, which is mirrored on the earpiece. Now, I'm not sure if this is intentional or not, but because the mouthpiece and earpiece are raised, that actually prevents the glass from touching a table when you lay it flat on the table, so it provides some protection to the glass display. I also find that these trim pieces give you some gripability to the device when you pull it out of your pocket. So when you go to grab the phone, you just kind of grab onto these little strips, and it helps you get a handle on it without dropping it. Now, just like the original Moto X, there's no LED notification light, and that's because the notifications appear right on the screen. So if you just tilt the phone or handle the phone or take it out of your pocket, the time and your notifications pop up. So you can tap on that notification and see exactly what it is, and you can launch into that notification, or you can swipe to unlock the phone to take you directly to the home screen. So if you launch the notification, launches the app and takes you right there. Now, if you had more than one notification pending, you can actually select which one you want, but you're limited to 3, and then you get this little more icon and see the other available notifications. And when you select that, it actually just takes you to your notification drop-down shade. Now, alternatively, you can wave your hand over the display to wake it up and again show you your notifications because it's using those IR LEDs to read for the presence of your hand. It also works with some other features which I'll explore in this video. Now, of course, this phone is also constantly listening for its wake up command, and you can customize that. So in my case, it's, "Hello, computer. What's the weather like tomorrow in Rochester Hills, Michigan?"
Tomorrow's forecast for Rochester Hills is 75 degrees with fog.
"Hello, computer. Launch YouTube."
Opening YouTube. Okay, what would you like to play?
Detroit Borg. Hey guys, Mike here, the Detroit Borg, with a look at perhaps the best budget smartphone on the market today. This is as close as you get to having that Star Trek-like computer where you can just talk to thin air and get answers spoken back to you. So if we take a look at the interface again, it's pretty close to stock Android. So you can see your notification panel, you can clear them all, you can jump to your quick toggles and settings, you can jump to your settings panel, which does have a few features in here that are unique to this experience. You can also swipe all the way to the right to get to Google Now, so you can see that's constantly present here. And then you can also swipe up to access Google Now, like so. And then you have your recent apps, which you can swipe all the way to close, or you can launch into the app pretty quickly. Now if you set "Hello, computer" as your phrase, you will no longer be able to say, "Okay, Google," to launch that. All right, so how do you do all that? Let's go to the settings panel. So under the settings panel, you have Moto. And Moto is basically the hub where you can control many of these unique Moto X features. So you have Moto Assist. Now, Moto Assist, you've seen with other Motorola devices, they've just been redesigned here. So these are automated actions depending on conditions or triggers. So for example, sleeping mode, this activates during certain times of day, which you can set. You also have driving mode, which again is triggered by a variety of conditions. You also have home mode. So when you arrive at your GPS location, you can select that right here. So it knows when you're home and then will begin speaking text messages and your caller ID to you. You also have meeting mode, which uses your calendar for meeting times. So it knows when you're in a meeting, and you can select certain actions here for silence, auto reply. So for example, if you select auto reply, you can adjust the automation message and that sort of thing. Now you also have actions. Now actions include wave to silence. Again, it's using those IR sensors on the front, so you can go ahead and try it here. So if you get an alarm or a phone call, all you have to do is wave your hand over the screen and it stops it. You also have twist for quick capture. This is a setting you can actually adjust within the camera app itself. But again, this is a really nice feature that allows you to basically twist the phone to activate the camera app really quickly. You also have approach for a Moto display, which I demonstrated earlier. Just wave your hand over it to wake up the screen to show you your notifications and time. You also have Moto Display, which allows you, again, to see your notifications on the lock screen. So Moto Display is enabled, and you can select certain apps to appear here. So for example, you can select Calendar, Chrome, etc., all the apps that push notifications, and if you don't want them, you can unselect them. You also have more privacy, so you can hide notification details. So if you don't want people to read your text messages or snippets of your emails, you can enable more privacy. Now let's go to our voice controls, and this is where we can enable and manage the launch phrase. So you can see I have it enabled, and I can go to manage launch phrase and set up a new one here. So right now it's just telling me what a launch phrase might consist of, like OK Moto X, or I could just use OK Google Now. So if I want to select a custom message here, let's go ahead and set this up. Select next, select record, OK computer. It liked that, so let's continue. OK computer, and then we're all set. So you have to speak it 3 times, and once you're all set, you can click save, go to Moto, and now we can say, OK computer, to activate the feature. We can also disable some of the commands while the screen is locked. So for example, we have our standard Google commands, which you can disable, but those are things like, what's the weather like, send an appointment, launch an app, that sort of thing. You also have calls, so you can disable the ability to place calls or check voicemail from the lock screen, as well as disabling the ability to read back notification details from the lock screen. Now, if you use a PIN to unlock your device, a lot of these voice actions will not work unless you enter in your PIN code, so they have enabled the ability to speak your PIN code instead. Now, just to show you how this works, I've disabled Google commands from the lock screen, so any command will basically trigger me to enter in my PIN. OK computer, what's the weather like tomorrow in Detroit?
Say or type PIN code
1701.
Tomorrow's forecast for Detroit is 70 degrees with a thunderstorm.
So if we take a look at the app drawer, of course, I have lots of AT&T bloatware thrown in here, but if you get the Pure Edition, you don't have to worry about that. So you'll see the standard array of Google apps, all the standard stuff you need, and then you have your Motorola apps. So you'll see things like the Moto app, which basically takes you to that settings panel, which I showed you earlier, allows you to control some of the Moto exclusive features. And then you have Motorola Migrate, which allows you to transfer information from an Android phone or an iPhone to this phone. So for example, if you select iPhone, all you have to do is log in with your Apple ID to transfer your contacts, calendar information, and that sort of thing. You also have Motorola Help, which explores some of the features of this phone, and of course you can also call them or use an online chat to ask your question. Now if you want to uninstall or disable some of these apps, just tap and hold on to it, take it up to App Info, and then you can uninstall or force stop or disable. So I'm going to go ahead and click Disable, click OK. So it's uninstalling the app. So now if I go to my app drawer, you'll see that that app is gone, so I can continue down the line until all the apps I don't want are gone. Now, Motorola Connect is a feature that allows you to receive text messages and phone calls within your Chrome browser. All you have to do is install the Chrome extension, and you can receive and reply to messages within the browser. So the camera app is pretty basic. You swipe up and down to zoom in and out. You tap anywhere on the scene to take a photograph. You can also start recording video just by tapping up here, so you can pause it, resume it, and you can also snap a photograph while recording video just by tapping the screen like so. You can stop that. Now you can swipe in from the left edge to get to all of your options here. So you'll see things like HDR, your flash controls. You also have tap to focus here. So if you enable this feature, you now get this tap target or focus target, which you can move around. And as you can see, when you move it around, it focuses and adjusts exposure for that specific area. You can see it's pretty quick. The more light you have, the better it is. We also have our video settings here. So you can see we have 4K video recording and slow-mo at 1080p. So 4K video recording, when you activate it, you get a little 4K indicator up here. But when you leave the app and return to it, it does revert back to 1080p here, so you have to go back here to select 4K. So it just warns you that this takes up a lot more space. In fact, when you're recording 4K video, it does run pretty warm, which is typical of a lot of phones that record in 4K. We also have panorama mode, which you can toggle on and off, and then we have our geolocation, which you can toggle on and off. We also have our screen resolution, so we have widescreen or standard. Standard takes best advantage of the 13 megapixels, while 16:9 crops that. You can also turn off your shutter sounds, and you can disable the quick capture feature, which allows you to twist your wrist to activate the camera. Now, in terms of camera quality, it's pretty standard stuff. It's a little overexposed, the colors are a little oversaturated, and then it kind of has a hard time finding focus, where a lot of cameras are using other technologies to find focus. This one tends to be a little dodgy. 4K video recording is also really sharp, but just like the still camera, it also suffers from the same overexposure tendency. Now, without optical image stabilization, 4K video recording doesn't look particularly smooth because it's not using any software stabilization either in 4K. But of course, 1080p is smoothed out thanks to software. Low light performance of this camera is also pretty mediocre with grainy images and poor color reproduction, and when you use the LED flash, again, it heavily discolors the scene. Now, because the LED flash surrounds the camera lens and places the diodes on either side of it, that means you get less shadows in your scene when using the flash, which is particularly interesting. Most cameras place the LED somewhere at the angle of the viewpoint of the lens, which does mean you get more shadows, but unfortunately, this also means you get a lot of red eye with this LED flash. What's up guys, Mike here, the Detroit Borg, testing out the front-facing camera, which is good for 2 megapixels and 1080p HD video, which is pretty decent. As you can see here, it does a pretty good job balancing both the lowlights and highlights of the scene, so it's pretty even. Now this is a really good looking display. That AMOLED technology gives you colors that really pop and those deep blacks that make things look extra vivid. We also have 424 pixels per inch of full 1080p resolution, which gives you really sharp text, especially on full websites. So even the smallest text is pin sharp. Now, like a lot of AMOLED displays, this is definitely not as bright as an LCD panel, especially something like the iPhone 6, which is a really bright panel. Now, compared to the other AMOLED displays out there, like the Galaxy S5, this is actually pretty close to it. It's just a little warmer in terms of the color temperature, so it looks a little more muted than the bright, cool colors of the Galaxy S5. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we have 2 front-facing speakers, but only one of them is the loudspeaker. The other is just the earpiece. That's different from the Moto G because the earpiece and the loudspeaker act together as dual stereo speakers. So we have one mono speaker, but it's a louder, more bass-heavy speaker, so it sounds clearer than the dual speakers of the Moto G. So just to show you the difference, let me go ahead and play some samples. What's up guys, Mike here, the Detroit Borg, with a look at what might be the design of the 2nd generation iPad Air, expected to be announced next month in October. What's up guys, Mike here, the Detroit Borg, with a look at what might be the design of the 2nd generation iPad Air, expected to be announced next month in October. Now if you look at our Geekbench 3 scores, you can see huge gains have been made since the old Moto X. So we have a Snapdragon processor clocked at 2.5 gigahertz versus the one from last year clocked at 1.73 gigahertz. Both of them have 2 gigs of RAM, but you can see that modern processor is certainly much better than last year. Now, the 2nd generation Moto X stands out for the same reasons that the 1st generation Moto X did, but it now brings it up to standard flagship Android specs with no compromised displays and a large form factor with premium build quality. It still stands out for its highly customizable design, so you can personalize it to the way you want it. And then you have that near stock Android experience, which is very smooth and quick. Performance is great. This is one of the smoothest and quickest performing Android phones you can buy right now, thanks again to that stock experience. But it adds very useful features, such as that glanceable notification system and the hands-free interaction with voice control. Now, the only weak point here is a camera that really can't keep up with some of the best out there, and then the battery life, which isn't great. I get about 3 hours of on-screen time, which is definitely on the low side and a concern for me. So in the end, the Moto X gives you great build quality and customization with a great software experience, but still lacks the battery performance and camera performance a lot of people really desire today. So that's going to do for me in this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you again in the next one.